Hello, guys, and welcome to this week's episode of the Transfer News Central podcast with me, Declan Flannery, and my good friends Johnny and James. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
That was really unenthusiastic, wasn't it?
Amazing. So we've had a crazy week of transfer news yet again because all these sagas do not want to end. So this week we'll be talking about the Griezmann saga. He's finally officially joined Barcelona, but Atletico are disputing the price that needs to be paid. The Ligt saga is hopefully coming to an end because Ajax have not included him in their pre-season squad. So hopefully we're expecting an announcement there soon. And obviously back to the best league in the world, the Premier League, as Fabian Delphin has moved to Everton. Lukaku and Inter continue their love affair. Will it happen? Will it not? And to Johnny's ecstatic news that Burnley have finally done some transfer business. So I think Johnny's happy about that. And Aston Villa's spending finally reaches over 100 million, which is an outrageous number. But let's start with Griezmann. What do you think's happening there, Johnny? Is it a good move by Barca?
Well, I've always liked Griezmann. I think he's one of those players that has the flair, the talent and the flair, but also when his head's in the game, a very good work rate to go alongside that flair. I think for years he's sort of been the poster boy of Atletico Madrid, and even for his national team, actually, France, as someone who they look to for inspiration, almost like a lesser Messi, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but when Atletico were sort of looking lost for ideas in certain games, they looked for someone like Griezmann to be that inspiration, that piece of magic to make the killer finish. But yeah, I think Barcelona taking that on board, it's going to be interesting actually, because like I said this in the podcast before, he's very like Messi in that he's that guy. He likes being the main man. I think he thrives off it. He's got an ego. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I do think generally over the years his attitude has been good, his application has been good. As I say, working hard off the ball. It'll be interesting to see how he transitions then from being that main man at Atletico to being the sort of secondary or even less at Barcelona, where obviously Messi's there, you've got Suarez as well, and potentially even a possible move for Neymar on the cards. Yeah, there's been lots of stories on that. I mean, if that did happen, it'd be interesting to see how all those fitted together. But I do think it probably will be a good move for Barcelona. I think, as I say, if he replicates the kind of form he's done for his country and for Atletico Madrid, I think he will succeed there. He has as I say, the only issue is that his temperament, his ego, maybe does get sort of knocked a little bit with not being that main guy. But then again, in the France team with Paul Pogba and with other stars, he's still delivered for his country. Yeah. So maybe I'm exaggerating that a little bit.
No, that's a really good point. And obviously, so Atletico Madrid have sold him to Barcelona for about £108 million, it seems to be. But obviously,
or is it 180?
Atletico want about £72 million more. So what do you make of this, James? Because I've never really heard of anything like this where it can't be agreed, or surely a release clause is a release clause.
The way that release clauses work, I think, is that the contracts for Spanish players are not held by the clubs, they're held by La Liga.
Okay.
So you just go to La Liga's offices, which is what actually happened. There was a video of it on Twitter yesterday. You go to the Liga's offices, you pay the release clause, and then you can talk to the player and they can sign with you. That's how release clauses work in Spain. So what happened is that the Griezmann's release clause before July the 1st, he signed a new contract last year, which I think was intended for him to leave this summer.
Yeah.
Where the release clause was like 180 million euros until July the 1st, and then it goes down to 120 euros, something like that. So Atletico's argument is Griezmann agreed this deal with Barcelona before July the 1st.
Okay.
Even though he didn't actually sign it. The deal was, there's been a few public statements that it was agreed in March between the player and Barcelona. So therefore, they're using that as a way to say we should be getting the full release clause, not the lesser release clause, which came into effect in July. I don't think, especially given the power of Barcelona, I don't think they're going to be able to get any more money.
Yeah.
Especially now he's actually signed for Barcelona. It's not like they're negotiating a deal and it might fall through. He's a Barcelona player, so possession is 9/10 of the law, as they say. Barcelona will probably not have to pay anything else, but that's the reality. I guess Atletico look like they're fighting for as much as they can get for him, which probably goes down well with the fans. But Griezmann's not coming across well with the Atletico fans, I don't suspect, after this. The way it's been handled has been a bit of a mess, but he will be a good signing for Barcelona. I'm pretty sure he will do very well.
Yeah, definitely. It already felt like a bit of a mess after last summer when we had this whole silly documentary about the decision. And obviously he ended up staying when everyone was sort of expecting him to leave. And now he has left. It does sort of feel like this relationship has ended in the worst possible way, because now it's not like, okay, we've just got rid of him, we've got 108 million, we're happy. We're like, no, we're going to drag this even further.
Yeah.
And the reason this relationship has now turned even uglier is we thought this saga was finally over, that had continued for like 600 days or so. Would Griezmann go to Barca? And now we're not sure if it's going to carry on even more. It just seems really ridiculous, especially with how good of a player Griezmann is. What crazy turn is this going to take next?
Well, I think the part of the reason is it's difficult because he's been at the club a long time. Atletico, with all due respect, aren't that top-tier elite level club. They seem to be just below. I suppose you could look at maybe Tottenham or Borussia Dortmund as another example of a really good European club, consistently in the Champions League, consistently at the top, fighting at the top end of the table, but not quite in that top-level elite bracket of Barcelona, Manchester City, Juventus, those kind of clubs. And a player like Griezmann probably can only go, he will probably only feel like he can only go so many seasons, being the man who's carrying everything, being the man who's trying to be that inspiration, the messiah, before he starts to think, well, actually, I want to be fighting for more trophies. I want to be fighting for even more than I am already at Atletico Madrid. And it's also worth noting as well, Atletico Madrid's style under Diego Simeone can be quite defensive-minded, shape first in a way. It's particularly when they play against the bigger sides. It can be quite rigid, tough to break down, and focused first on structure. Whereas Griezmann probably feels that a bigger club like Barcelona or Real Madrid, where they're playing a certain style, they're always trying to entertain the fans. He probably feels his talents are more suited to that. So it's a hard one because he has given a lot to Atletico Madrid, and he did do his whole statement last year to stay for another year when everyone else thought he would leave. Now, I don't necessarily like the way he did that. I thought it was a bit, oh, look at me kind of mantra. Yeah. But he did stay when many expected him to leave. And now comes the time where I think he said, you know what, I've been here a long time. I want to take that next step. At the same time, I'm sure the Atletico fans are sort of annoyed at him in a sad kind of way because they realise it is kind of the end of an era. He has given so much. He is a fan hero. And now to see him actually want to make that next step, I suppose it's kind of upsetting for them to see. And obviously the club, having just signed João Felix for a lot of money, will probably be thinking, well, can we get even more out of Griezmann, because we've just made this big statement money signing ourselves as his replacement.
I mean, you have to remember that when they unveiled João Felix, they gave him the number 7 before Griezmann was even out the door. It just seems that this relationship has ended in the worst possible way, but it does sort of make you think that with players like Griezmann and Neymar, sort of this refusing to sort of come back for pre-season training, etc., is there just too much player power with these top level footballers at the moment?
This reminds me so much of the Thibaut Courtois thing last year, because all summer he was linked with Real Madrid, and he kind of said, one minute he said, oh, I'll sign a contract with Chelsea. Next minute he said, I don't want to sign a contract with Chelsea. And then he says, oh, my family live in Madrid, I want to go back there. And then he refused to come back for pre-season training because he wanted to force the move. And then it got all messy. And basically Chelsea fans now hate him. Literally, they call him Snake, basically. You look at Eden Hazard, the way he left Chelsea was probably, I think he actually said it as well. I don't want to leave in the same way that Thibaut Courtois left. I want to leave in a positive, healthy way. That's what he did. That's probably an example of a good way to leave a club, because Hazard was to Chelsea in a way what Griezmann was to Atletico Madrid, and he was leaving for a bigger club, and I say that as a Chelsea fan. Real Madrid is probably the biggest club in the world, but he did it in a way which was positive and respectful, and he'd be welcome back, and all the fans still love him, whereas Griezmann's done the complete
in a way,
opposite.
James, if you trigger that release clause, then the club shouldn't have anything wrong with that, because that allows the player to go to the club.
Yeah.
And also, interesting you mentioned about the number 7 shirt being handed over, actually, as well, prematurely to João Felix. Could that not be another suggestion by the club, thinking, sort of foreshadowing ahead and then making their point stronger that the deal had already been done? Hence, we want another 70 million or so for him, because they're saying, essentially, by giving Felix that number 7, that Griezmann's already out the door before that time period. So it's all quite clever politics, actually, isn't it?
Exactly.
I mean, we can criticise Griezmann. I'm sure he probably wishes he had handled it slightly differently. But again, I'm just looking at the facts. They've paid his buyout clause. He's said he's happy to go, and who wouldn't be? He's going to Barcelona. As we've said, Atletico are sort of kicking up a fuss at the moment with this £180 million or £108 million. It's like they got the 0 and the 8 the wrong way around kind of scenario, and they're kicking up a fuss there, and and as you said, James, they give João Felix a number 7 to say he's out the door, so it's getting over politicized, it's getting over sort of thought. At the end of the day, if Barcelona pay your release clause, you have to talk to Barcelona, and no one says no to Barcelona, so it's difficult, it is.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a really good point. I think it's something I'd also like to talk about. Like, I think we've spoken about Griezmann quite a lot the last couple of weeks because even though 5 weeks we've been talking about it, been going on way longer than that. But how do you think Griezmann is actually going to fit in now? Now that he's a Barcelona player, how do you expect Barcelona to line up next season with him?
I was thinking about it, and because they've got quite a lot of attacking talent. And you look at them. They got obviously got Messi. He's pretty good, I hear.
Who?
Suarez, Dembele, who I think is a quality player.
He may end up going according to some.
And
Yeah.
Coutinho, they've still got Coutinho.
And he may end up going according to some
Well, some
reports.
people are saying that he's not for sale, which makes me laugh. Like, if it was me, this is what I would do.
You get James from Chelsea.
4-2-3-1, and I would have. I like the way that France played with Griezmann, is that they had Giroud as his target man, and that he created the space for Griezmann to run into.
Yeah, no, it did work
I
well.
think you could have Suarez doing that with Griezmann, Messi, and Dembele or somebody else behind him, and that's quite an attacking lineup. But in Spanish football, you can get away with playing that, And I mean, Messi can play anywhere. He can play up front. He can play wide. He can play number 10. He can play anywhere.
Potentially a 4-3-1-2 maybe, with like Messi or Griezmann as the 10 and the other one as the striker, and maybe Suarez as the other striker, and vice versa. As I say, it just becomes complicated if reports come true that Neymar does make his way back to Barcelona. It would be absolutely crazy, and then suddenly you're looking at it. I think Suarez becomes the fall guy then, actually.
Definitely.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Because then you'd have Neymar, Griezmann, and Messi as the front three,
And
basically.
Suarez to come off the bench.
Suarez and Dembele to come off the bench.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say though, even though he's still a very good striker, I don't think he's quite the same Luis Suarez he once was. I watched him a few times recently, last season in La Liga, and while he's still got the movement, the skills, his finishing isn't as good as it was. It's not as accurate as it was. I feel like he misses more chances than he used to. At that season for Liverpool, he was unbelievable, and probably even when he went to Barcelona to make up the MSN trio, even then, I still think that season he had with Liverpool is as good as it got. He carried that on with the MSN for sure, but honestly, some of the goals he scored in that 2-3 year period, unbelievable. But he's not quite that player, I don't think, anymore. I think age is catching up with him a little bit. Still fantastic player. That would be crazy, wouldn't it, to think that Suarez would become a bench player in the case if Neymar returned. And then, that's just mad, isn't it? It's just an embarrassment of riches.
El Clasico is going to be incredible next year. I mean, you've got Jovic, Hazard, Vinicius. You've got, if Gareth Bale stays, him, Benzema.
Potentially Paul Pogba.
Yeah. And then you've got Barcelona with what we've just talked about. It's going to be incredible.
And Frenkie de Jong as well, who's a lovely player to watch, isn't he? Yeah.
Frenkie de Jong, yeah. He's quality, yeah, absolutely.
No, I do think it's something to really be excited for next season. But give me a sec while I warm up my segue. I just need to stretch it out a little bit. So obviously we've been talking about the Griezmann saga. Now I've got another saga for you, the Ligt saga, something that we've spoken again about quite a lot, and it's finally taken another turn now as Ajax set out on their pre-season tour of Austria, and Matthias de Ligt's name has not been included in the 28-man list. This is obviously fueling more and more speculation that a transfer to Juventus is imminent. Is that what you guys see happening? Do you think it's any day now?
Well, we talked about this a few weeks ago, didn't we? There were strong reports that had linked him with the move to Juventus, and we all said at the time, Maurizio Sarri, a very playing out from the back Pep Guardiola-esque manager, and we thought he'd suit that style really, really well. A young player, leader, would probably benefit from the likes of Bonucci and Chiellini, strong, powerful presences who've been immense defenders for really long periods of time, so he'd probably benefit from playing and working alongside them, developing his own game. And as we say, Maurizio Sarri, as I've said, Maurizio Sarri's style being one that's, as I say, progressive and encourages defenders to come out with the ball. I think that'd help him as well because that's what he's used to at Ajax. And it's also interesting, we've been looking at reports. I remember I think it'd been said at the time Barcelona had agreed a fee of about 70 to 75 million pounds before the Juventus talk had come into play. And now it seems like Juventus have agreed a fee for less than that. So it's interesting to see how they've done there with the negotiation.
I suspect the remaining might be going to a certain agent.
Everyone's favourite agent.
Yeah.
And I still don't think that de Ligt will be there for too long.
But we agreed at the time, James, didn't we, that club would be a good move for him.
Yeah, Juventus is a big club which wins things, which can challenge for the Champions League.
Right kind of manager for him as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, plays the right kind of football. Although I laugh with my friends because I remember Maurizio Sarri saying about Callum Hudson-Odoi, he's only 18. No 18-year-old to play as much as him.
No.
He won't be ready till he's 22.
Mm.
You know, players aren't ready till they're 22. You know, so.
But he did end up playing quite a lot, didn't he? Towards the end.
Yeah. I know there are reasons for that, which probably weren't to do with him.
Mm.
But that's a different story altogether. But I just saying it made me laugh. But that he's signing an 18-year-old.
19, come on. 19.
19-year-old. Yeah, but he's a quality player and he gets into that.
And also, you got to say with De Ligt, there is a bit of an exception there. People are quoting him as one of the best few centre-backs in Europe. Whereas Hudson-Odoi, of course, I know you were, but obviously this isn't just any ordinary 19-year-old. This is a high-end defender who's been talked about in the same breath as some of the legends of the game, even Sergio Ramos.
You guys have to remember that he started the Europa League final 2 seasons ago. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's been in that Ajax team for quite a while now. So I think the interesting thing to think about from this latest report of him not being included in the list is also fellow rising star Donny van der Beek hasn't been included. The Brazilian David Neres and Nicolas Tagliafico have also not been included. Some of the top players for Ajax, but obviously Neres and Tagliafico played at Copa America, which makes sense them being given extended time. But van der Beek is another player that's been linked with a couple of clubs this summer. He's still very young. So do you read any more into it there that also him and van der Beek have been left out?
Go on, James. I'll let you speak.
Well, Van der Beek's been linked with a few clubs in the last few days.
Yeah.
I've seen him be linked with Real Madrid, I think.
Yeah.
Linked with him.
I thought he was linked with, yeah.
Because in case they don't get Pogba, I think there was probably an Italian club in there, and Manchester United as well. I think.
Yeah, it was earlier in the summer, yes, when he was linked to Manchester United.
But he's a good player. Like, there's lots of players.
I can't believe Hakim Ziyech still hasn't been.
Yeah, I know. I can't believe he's still at Ajax with his buyout clause. It's like.
Well, it's funny because I remember Ziyech was saying he had a love for Arsenal since he was younger. You know, he's basically saying to Arsenal, you know, he said in a few interviews, I would love to play for Arsenal. I liked Arsenal since I was a boy, blah blah blah. And apparently Arsenal aren't interested because they feel it would take too much of their budget, which is ridiculous, isn't it?
I think you have to remember he has been playing at the Africa Cup of Nations, and I know Morocco are now out.
It doesn't stop people looking at Nicolas Pepe, though, does it?
Yeah, but nothing's progressing, though, is it? It's more rumours because Nicolas Pepe's had a much better season.
I guess.
I'm not saying anything bad about Ziyech, but...
No, but different players, aren't they? Different players.
Yeah, definitely. But I do feel like it's the same thing we saw the World Cup last summer, because now there seems to be football on constantly, which is a great thing for all us football fans, but it does slow down some transfers, especially for the Premier League, because our window is now much shorter. And that leads into another one of my awesome segues, is the Premier League, because we can't get enough of it, and we have to talk about it nearly every week, because it is the best league.
Are you an ambassador for the Premier League now?
I'm trying to get that job, but we know it is the best league in the world, and I wanted to, probably the biggest transfer news story we've had this week that has continued is Lukaku and Inter Milan. And obviously we know that Inter Milan sporting director flew into London this week to have a meeting with Manchester United representatives about working out a fee and putting in an official offer. And it seems that we don't know what the number is there, but it seems that it's nowhere near what United want. They want to at least get back what they paid him from Everton, so they want to make a profit. And it's quite interesting that he didn't play in Manchester United's first pre-season game today in Australia. What do you guys think is going to happen? Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? Because it feels very different to the Paul Pogba situation at United.
Yeah, I mean, it's different because you even saw it the way he came out. I think he was saying, you know, he would be happy to leave, but he would also be happy to stay. I think he'd said in an interview not too long ago. And I think you get that sense, you know, he was playing quite a lot for United towards the end of last season under Solskjaer. So there's the sense that he still has some kind of role here. But at the same time, no one, I don't think, would be surprised if he was cast aside because, of course, there was the sense that Solskjaer maybe did prefer Rashford and saw Greenwood as a player who he could sort of blood through and maybe get some more minutes next season. I think that it's quite funny in a sense that they pay a lot of money for players and then refusing to admit to certain overpayments, they will demand that the other club pays more. And in many cases, I don't think that's going to work out. I've heard that £90 million for Lukaku, I think that was one of the rumours that was suggested. And I mean, it's just unrealistic, isn't it? I don't think he's done bad at United, but I wouldn't say he's absolutely progressed since his time with Everton.
Well, I think the reasoning is they're just talking about in today's today's market if all these other players are going, which is fully understandable, and it feels like we're definitely getting to that point where the market has to sort of come back down. But because of that Neymar transfer a couple of years ago, it's just sent everything crazy, and we're seeing certain players, no offence to him, but look at someone like Tyrone Mings that has just moved to Aston Villa, £20 million. Now, this is a player that could not get in the Bournemouth squad. I'm not saying he's a bad player. He had a very good season last year in the Championship, but £20 million.
Yeah, I know. I just think that with Lukaku, it's an interesting one because it's not like he's unsettled at United, but there is a sense that, but half it is a strange one. And obviously, Inter have a lot of money to spend, and under they've got rich owners now. Antonio Conte has always been an admirer of Lukaku. At the same time, I don't know. I'll ask you, Dex. You're obviously a Man United fan.
Am I?
Would you consider Lukaku to be a £90 million investment? Because for me, I feel like there are better value strikers out there.
Oh, no, fully. I fully agree with you. And 90 mil, I think it's just the whole prospect of them trying to at least make a profit and get their money back. I don't think he's worth 90 million at all. I don't think he was probably worth the 75 million they paid a couple of years ago from Everton. Even a very different United now from when United bought Lukaku. They've changed again so much in a couple of years. And I guess it's that worry that is he going to be that understudy to Rashford? Because as far as you see it, Rashford is the main striker there. But it also depends what formation Solskjaer's going to be playing moving forward. Because I think United fans would quite like to see maybe two up front, something a little different a bit, because obviously with Sir Alex Ferguson we always saw a classic 4-4-2, which is something we just don't really see anymore, especially in the Premier League. Especially when you've got another player like Anthony Martial that probably does want to play more of a centre forward role and has always played that left wing position, so he's definitely not worth that price. But you can't blame United for trying to get that money back, at least in today's market.
I think it's a good situation really with Lukaku in the sense that he's not kicking up a fuss in wanting to leave. He's happy to stay and play. And it generally, like we saw at the end of last season, he was contributing quite well for United. In a way, his attitude was good. So they're in a situation where they can demand this money because he's not desperate to leave. I think you get the sense that Solskjaer would probably be happy to keep hold of him because he is a goal scorer. And if you provide chances to Lukaku, more often than not, as we say, he will get on the end of that and he will score goals. He can hold the ball relatively well as well. So he is a useful player to have at his disposal. And, I don't think anything's set with Lukaku at the moment. Everyone seemed to be convinced that he was going to leave, but if the club want to play hardball with Inter and want to demand more money, then they're well within, as we say, they're well within the rights to do that, because Lukaku himself isn't desperately pushing for a move and probably would slide back into Solskjaer's plans if he wasn't sold. And you can imagine him playing quite a bit next season and delivering somewhat.
Yeah, definitely. Like United have got a lot of games to play next year with the Europa League as well, and I think everyone's really excited to see more of Mason Greenwood. He's still only 17. Do you know what I mean? He's got a long way to go, but he scored over 30 goals for the under-23s last season. I think there's definitely going to be chances for him and Lukaku if he does stay. But the other question I want to get to you guys is, so James, how different do you feel the Lukaku saga is to the Paul Pogba saga? Do you feel like there's a big difference, or is it quite similar?
I think it's different because, well, the agent is different for a start off. And the way that he's gone about it has been a bit better. I mean, he's made pretty clear that he would prefer to go and he would like to work with Antonio Conte. It's like a bromance that's been brewing for about 3 or 4 years. And they've still not worked together, but they both wanted to. He wanted him at Juventus, he wanted him at Chelsea, now he wants him at Inter. So I think he would like to go, and he's made that clear.
Yeah.
But I think he would also come back and be professional if it fell through.
And do you not see that with Paul Pogba?
Well, no, let me finish. I think Paul Pogba would come back and play if it fell through. But with Paul Pogba, there's always this soap opera around him, like with his agent making comments and he makes comments. And every year he's coming out with something. And last year when Mourinho was there were these talk of like he wanted to go to Real Madrid or Barcelona. There's always going to be in the background with him. It's always going to be his head's being turned. He wants to go somewhere else. He's looking elsewhere. Pogba is potentially, on his day, is a world-class player. Lukaku is not quite at that level. He's a very good player, though. I rate him very highly, but he's not going to play for Real Madrid. So that's what I mean. And I think Pogba doesn't want to be sitting playing in the Europa League for a team that is not going to challenge for the title this year, and probably not next year either. He wants to win things now. He's in his prime. I don't know how old he is. 25, 26? He wants to be winning the big trophies now. He wants to be winning the Champions League. He wants to be winning league titles. I can't blame him for wanting to go. I mean, I want, like, Real Madrid is the biggest club in the world. But the way he's going about it is not the best. And I mean, what I've heard is Juventus has now pulled out because Man United have set this stupid price of £180 million, which is just, it's almost as big as Neymar, which, Crikey, I don't know how Madrid would afford that, but I'm sure they could find a way.
In Pogba's defence, though, I mean, there's been reports this week saying that on the tour, on the pre-season tour, so he's gone with United, he went on the tour, he was signing lots of fans' autographs, he was there to take photos with them, which I suppose you could say everyone should do, but not every player does do that, particularly if they try to stay out of the spotlight, but he was happy to sign autographs, take photos. He was apparently very, very impressive in training, scored world-class scissor kick in training, and much to the surprise of some of his teammates, it was unbelievable, and apparently his attitude was really, really good. So, I think there's two sides to every story. I mean, you compare that with Neymar, who doesn't even turn up to training, or even Laurent Koscielny, who doesn't even turn up to training, and you sort of do think, well, maybe he could have dealt with it a bit better. Maybe if his agent wasn't Mino Raiola, maybe he would have dealt with the situation slightly better. From Pogba himself, and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's come out, and whatever we think about whether he might be a bit of a puppet for the Glazers or not, he's come out and said, you know what, Paul Pogba, for him, there's been no sign of a rift, really. He says that he always tries hard in training. He gives a good effort on the pitch, whether, some people might disagree with that based on some performance at the end of last season, but it's clear he's got the manager's back, and he suggested there was maybe a bit of an agenda against him.
Yeah, today he actually got an assist in their first friendly game, so he's definitely still up for it and still wants to play, which is good because he should want to play football regardless. But for me, it does sort of remind me a bit of a few years ago when a man named Wayne Rooney handed in a transfer request at Manchester United, and it does sort of feel like that, where he needed reassurances from United that they were serious and they wanted to challenge for a trophy again, and it does sort of remind me of that. So do you feel like if Pogba was given the reassurances, if they made a few more signings this summer, if they pushed and had a good season, maybe gave him the captain's armband again as a sweetener, do you think we could see Pogba staying?
I've heard rumours today that Solskjaer wants to give him the captaincy. I saw that. I don't know whether he said that or whether that's just a rumour that's come out of the game. The weird thing about Paul Pogba is he'd probably be quite a good captain.
He was captain last season, wasn't he, to begin with?
Yeah,
until Mourinho stripped it off him, yeah.
Yeah, but he's a guy that needs to feel like he's wanted and valued and important, and second, he needs to feel like he's at a place where he can achieve his ambitions. So if Solskjaer can convince Pogba of that, and if Man United go out and buy Fernandes, they get Maguire, and they get maybe another attacking player,
get Sean Longstaff,
another attacking player, then.
How much?
Then you get those three players, get those three top players. Maybe maybe he'll look at that and say, well, okay, this is good ambition from the club. Maybe I'll give it another season. But
it's hard because I think United are at a stage where I'd feel like the dressing room I feel like they need to sort of rip it up and start. We've discussed this before. Yeah. They need to kind of rip it up and start from scratch a little bit. I do feel a bit sorry for Paul Pogba because I do actually think there is a bit too much. I kind of half agree with Solskjaer in that there isn't. I don't think Mino Raiola helps, but I do think there is a bit too much focus on Paul Pogba, an expectation almost, because he isn't Lionel Messi. He isn't someone who could carry the team every single week. Other players have to step up as well. And if Pogba has a bad performance or an average performance, he gets the most attention, which is fair enough. He probably is United's best outfield player, but it is a team game and other players have to sort of contribute and allow for some more creativity on the field. But again, it's hard because if I'm at United, as I say, I just want now to go back to basics and to have players who are running the yards, who are outrunning the opponent, who are giving their all on the pitch, who are maybe not the most world-class technical players, but they're competently technical players, obviously decent on the ball, but first and foremost that they're gonna give blood, sweat and tears for the shirt, because I think it's got to that stage where we're seeing it last season and we're seeing it in other parts, that there were too many players who didn't seem to have the head in the game. And sometimes I feel like, we've talked about the wage structure time after time, we've talked about how the players are mollycoddled by the club. The club need to get, I've said it so many times, the club need to get hard with the players. They need to get players in who are willing to earn the wage instead of being fed it straight away.
Yeah. And
they need to change the ethos. So in a way, as much as Paul Pogba is the best player at the club, and as much as I would like him to do well, because I think he's a great player, I feel like because of the mistakes United have put forward with their ideology, with their foundations, I feel like it's up to them now to sort of rip it up and go again and change the idea of winning things now, and just let's start by being competitive again. Let's start by making baby steps this season, building towards something instead of trying to throw the kitchen sink at it again and failing miserably.
Okay, yeah, I fully agree with what you said, Johnny.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
So probably something that might get Johnny stood up and out of his chair now. So let's talk about.
Oh, I don't know. I am tired.
Let's talk about Burnley FC. how busy they've been this week with two
we've been very busy.
important signings, to be fair. They've signed the left back Eric Peters from Stoke City for about £1 million, just under, and then they've re-signed Jay Rodriguez. He's come home from West Brom for £5 million. So let's get the resident Burnley expert in here and sort of pick apart these transfers for us.
So Eric Peters, it sort of does what it says on the tin, really. He was out of favour with Stoke last year, and a lot of Stoke fans were actually upset with that. They felt he should have been playing, but there was sort of a change in manager. The new manager comes in, and he prefers a more technical-minded left back, and as a result, he's sort of cast away. I think he was sent out on loan to France to sort of play, and it was in his deemed surplus to requirements this season with the new manager at the helm at Stoke. So Burnley come in for him on the basis that he's going to be a backup to Charlie Taylor, who is the main left back at Burnley. He had an excellent season last season, one of Burnley's best players, consistent really from the first few games of the season to the last, which is not something that could be said for many of the players last season. You know, there was a lot of inconsistency across the squad, but Charlie Taylor was excellent. He'll continue to progress, I think, next season, continue to develop his game. Still very young. Will probably want to work on his final ball a bit more, gets into some great positions, but a really good left back. And it's important, as with Stephen Ward leaving, actually going to Stoke, ironically, on a free transfer, then Burnley replace him with Stoke's second choice in that position. But Peters, is very much a Phil Barnes, the kind of left back in a way. He's sort of, you know what you're going to get. Grit.
Was that a compliment there, Johnny? Was that a compliment?
No, it is, because you're going to get grit, you're going to get determination, you're going to get... He's not going to be the prettiest. I remember people were saying the Stoke fans loved him until I remember Mark Hughes, when he was a Stoke manager, wanted to play with wing backs, and he played Peters at wing back, and it did not work at all for obvious reasons. He's not the most gifted with the ball at his feet. He's not going to be... He's not fit for the wing back position, but as a fullback, as a physical-minded fullback, he's going to do the job. So, very sensible signing, £1 million, going to be back up for the main guy. That's fine. Jay Rodriguez, £5 million initial fee with £5 million guaranteed next season, so it comes to £10 million altogether.
Yeah.
I think it's quite a clever signing, 29 years old, £10 million for a player who not too long ago was attracting quite a lot of teams. I mean, last season, Burnley actually had a £16 million bid turned down for Rodriguez. So now 12 months later, he's banged in 22 goals in the Championship, and now Burnley's got him for £10 million. I imagine that clause was inserted into his contract after West Brom found out that they weren't coming back up to the Premier League. So obviously, I imagine Rodriguez had that inserted just in case they didn't get promoted, which of course they didn't. Burnley swooped in on that, and generally the fans are quite happy with that. They were a bit disappointed not to get Che Adams, who went Southampton, younger player, with a lot more years left in him, very, very exciting talent. He went for 15 or 16 million pounds around that transfer fee. That was generally considered, the fans were generally quite annoyed because Burnley had been heavily linked with him. It was apparent that the club weren't willing to pay 20 million pounds for the fee, so there was that understanding. And then to see him go for 15 million, it had upset a few of the fans, but they were quite happy, I think, and content. Rodriguez at 10 million, 5 this year, 5 next year, he's considered to be quite good value for money. He's obviously used to play for Burnley. He's a homegrown talent. He's a Burnley fan, so the fans love him. I think he'll be extra determined, really, to impress, because he's aware, I think, that there have been sceptics since his injury at Southampton that have curtailed really ended his Southampton career in many ways. He fell down the pecking order, didn't quite have that same desire to take players on, that same burst of pace that he had before the cruciate injury, which kept him out of the World Cup as well. He was in contention for the England squad, and he missed that, unfortunately. As a result, and he ended up leaving Southampton, went to West Brom. Again, he was never quite the same player as before that injury. He'll be looking to prove a few of those doubters wrong. Does he go straight into the starting 11? I'm not sure. Chris Wood and Ashley Barnes were excellent, really, in many ways. They might not be the most easy on the eye of strikers, either of them. What they were doing is consistently delivering results. They didn't play for the full season. They actually came into the season as a partnership, sort of late December time, and they both managed to get double-figure tallies, which I think is quite impressive for a struggling bottom-half Premier League team. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them carrying on their partnership, and then, unlike Peter Crouch, who was 38, where Wood and Barnes knew, really, they pretty much had a guaranteed place in the 11 week in, week out. This time, they're both going to have to be on the toes a little bit more, because Rodriguez is genuinely someone who can come in and take their place, because we know that he's got qualities.
Oh no, I can definitely see him coming off the bench and grabbing a few important goals for Burnley next season, 100%. But do you think, because I think earlier in his career we've seen him play on that left side sometimes, could you see him doing that for Burnley?
No. I think McNeil has that left side down to a T at the moment. He was one of Burnley's shining lights towards in that second half of the season. I mean, he's been linked with Juventus. He's been linked with a few other clubs. He shows no fear. He'll take on any fullback. I remember he gave Trent Alexander-Arnold a bit of a torrid time at Anfield. He wouldn't stop taking him on. He showed no fear. Like I say, lots of pace, lots of confidence, and his final ball's pretty good too. And I think that's only going to get better with the more games that he plays. But Burnley have had a problem, I think, with wingers or wide men who just seem a bit scared or not confident enough to take on the opposing fullback. Robbie Brady, or maybe doesn't have the pace. Robbie Brady. Goodmanson often likes to come inside, but doesn't necessarily beat his man for pace. But McNeil, they played Hendrick actually on the right midfield position, which was like quite a conservative move by Dyche. Instead of Goodmanson, it angered a few fans really. But that allowed McNeil just the license to say, right, every time you get the ball, just keep running at your fullback. We don't care about position or shape. You keep running at your fullback, your opposing fullback, and you keep crossing the ball in. And that extra license he got, he really took advantage of that. So I don't think that Rodriguez is going to be playing left mid. Even then, you've got Robbie Brady, who's got the experience. Maybe not being as impressive for Burnley last season. In fact, he was quite poor. He struggled with injuries, but he'd still have a point to prove on the left-hand side as well. I feel like it's just going to be up front for Rodriguez.
That's they shut me down big time there, but that's a really good point actually. I feel like we've already spoken too much about Burnley because I was starting to fall asleep a bit. But I thought we'd sort of give you your little moment 1 week around.
Although, to be fair, a good segue for you here.
Well, no, I've already got one, Johnny. I've already got one. I've noticed that Burnley playing claret and blue. Another team that play in claret and blue, Aston Villa, their spending has gone over £100 million now. James, what do you think of this?
I think they've bought really, really wisely. I really do. When you look at the players they've bought, some of them are players that they had on loan, Tyrone Mings,
which is good.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good thing. Players that they already know, that are already integrated, that are already part of the team, that already know the system, that already know the manager, the coaching staff. Everything makes. I mean, Tyrone Mings I watched him in the playoff final, and he was superb. He was absolutely superb. I couldn't believe that he couldn't get in the Bournemouth team. I was like, this guy's easily good enough for the Premier League and to be starting every week. And
I think he had a lot of injury issues. That's why he never really made it at Bournemouth.
Yeah, that's right. But you can see why Bournemouth would have wanted a player like him, because he's good on the ball. He's a good attitude, works hard. He fits really well with what Bournemouth do.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to be a really, really important signing for them. They've made quite a few other signings as well, and like a lot. I mean, I didn't realise it had been 100 million until like somebody said it on Twitter. It was like, really, they spent that much already? I mean, some of the players that they bought, it's really, really good. They bought this guy from Wesley from Club Brugge.
He played a few games against Dortmund in the Champions League last season, so a player with European experience who's still very young. If he could be anything, it reminds me of Benteke coming out of the Belgium League. If he could be anything similar to the Benteke that we saw at Aston Villa.
And not the Benteke at Palace.
No, incredible. He scored in the pre-season friendly yesterday, Johnny. He's ready for this season. He's coming back. But no, I completely agree with you, James. I feel like these signings are really positive. A lot of young players like Matt Targett, Ezri Konsa from Brentford, and then a couple of those important players that played a role in promotion last season, El Ghazi and Mings, and also Courtney House, who maybe didn't play as much as Mings and Tuanzebe, who's gone back to United, but Courtney House could definitely be a good young centre-back to bring off the bench from them that they've signed from Wolves.
There's also rumours from Birmingham that they're looking at Gary Cahill as well,
which
I think would be a very good signing. Experience, knows the Premier League, he's a leader, obviously has a good relationship with John Terry.
Yep.
From Chelsea.
And Aston Villa was his old club, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's where he started out. Yeah, that's where he started out all those years ago. It's actually quite amazing when Gary Cahill's got quite an interesting journey in football when you actually look at it.
Actually, they're also heavily linked with a move to bring it back to Burnley for Tom Heaton.
Yes, they are.
Was that your segue?
That's going to be my segue, yeah. And
okay, touche.
Johnny's the master of segues.
I am the master of segue, thank you.
I'm trying my best here.
But I feel like there was apparently a £7 million bid on the table. Burnley are sort of, Sean Dyche said, we're a club that's in no pressure to sell, which is essentially saying up your bid in that kind of speak. But I think if they bought him for something like £10 million, that would be a really, really good signing because, Tom Heaton is not just a good shot stopper, but he's a fantastic leader, personality in the dressing room and on the pitch. He's always barking orders to his defenders in a nice way. But always, he marshals the defenders really well. He keeps people organised, particularly on set pieces. That's really important. As I'm sure you already know, his shot stopping capabilities are excellent. His distribution is very good, actually, as well. It's probably an underrated feature of his. It might not be quite Jordan Pickford for England or Edison or Alisson. All of those are very, very high level with their distribution, but it's certainly better than some goalkeepers. And particularly for Burnley, actually, it's quite impressive that he manages to kick the ball quite like long distances and picks out a man with relative ease. It's not always I know you may laugh, but that isn't as easy as it sounds. Nick Pope, for example, who is going to be, it looks like, after getting a 4-year extension, it seems like the club have put their eggs in his basket, which is why the heated speculation's mounting up. By giving Pope that 4-year deal, the club are basically saying, you're our long-term number one, and saying to Heaton, well, actually, they're putting doubt in Heaton's mind because his contract has 1 year left. After that, there's going to be uncertainty because, as we say, the club have backed the younger player in a similar way, I suppose, James, to Courtois and Cech in a way. The two very top-level goalkeepers, Chelsea backed Courtois and Cech had to leave because obviously he deserved to be playing, first-team football.
Obviously, sorry, Johnny, the player that does seem to be taking it over this £100 million mark is going to be Douglas Luiz, a youngster from Man City, who obviously I don't think many people would have heard of, but he had a very fruitful year at Sporting Girona in La Liga last season. So he played every single game for them in the league. So he's definitely coming with a bit of experience, even though he's 21, and he could be an interesting player to line up alongside Conor Hurrihan and John McGinn. He could add a bit of Brazilian flair to the Aston Villa team in the Premier League. What do you guys think of that transfer?
That's a really impressive transfer.
Mm.
Man City have produced a lot of quality players from their academy, but they just don't need to use many of them.
Yeah.
I mean, like you think about it, they let Jordan Sancho go.
Is that Jadon Sancho's brother?
Yeah, sorry, I meant Jadon Sancho. That'll be helpful. I'm not leaving that down, will I? They let Jadon Sancho go, and nobody bats an eye because they've got such a good squad. They're dominant, completely dominant in domestic football. They're still struggling a bit in Europe, but nobody. Jadon Sancho had a great season, but no one's saying, "Oh, City made a mistake," because City are dominant. They've got a few. I mean, they sold a player. They sold a left back, and I've forgotten his name, to PSV last year, and they've bought him back this summer.
Yeah,
which was a clever bit of business. And then there's other players that they've let go from their academy. But obviously people aren't worried because they're doing so well. But the players that they let go are good players. I mean, I remember watching Chelsea in the Youth Cup. We dominated it for 6 years. At least 2 or 3 of those finals, we played Manchester City. And some of the players that were playing for Manchester City are players that are now doing really well elsewhere. And Foden was part of that. So they've got a really great academy. It's just that they've got a squad where they don't need to use the academy. But they can use the academy in another way to bring in money, to
balance financial fair play, etc. Yeah.
So I think it's a great signing. Yeah.
Can I ask you guys a quick question? Where do you guys think Aston Villa finish next season in the Premier League?
I think bottom half, but I think they survive. I think it's. I think they're assembling a really, really good squad at the moment, and I think, as James has said, they're spending money very wisely, bringing in permanent signings that were loan signings last year, so there's less of an integration period, as we said. I think that they would have probably liked to have got Tammy Abraham, actually, who got, I think, 26 goals for them last year, but I think felt that with the situation Chelsea were in, that they would really be, it would be very difficult to prize him off them, so they'd probably be looking at...
And that's why they bought Wesley, I feel like Wesley is that replacement.
Yeah, I do think that. But of course, with that, there is slightly more doubt that will he be able to replicate his form in England. There is always a doubt, I think, with Brazilian talents and with, obviously, he's very talented. But there is always a doubt with some of these foreign signings when they haven't experienced English football and they're coming to a club like Villa, who are going to be, even though they spent a lot of money, trying to simply survive and try and do it in a good way, I guess.
Yeah.
Because Dean Smith is the manager. But I think they will. I think they'll finish above the I think they'll finish quite comfortably above the relegation zone. I don't think we're seeing a Wolves. I really don't think we're going to be seeing a Wolves.
Okay.
I feel like Wolves were exceptionally good last season. I feel like they had, in Ruben Neves, they had a top midfielder. Well, we already knew that. They got João Coutinho in. They had that Portuguese connection. He's got all the experience. And
The difference with Wolves was that they brought the players that they came up with came a year before in the Championship. Do you know what I mean? So they'd already been in the club a year. So playing in the Premier League made a big difference. James, where do you think Aston Villa finish next season?
I think they'll finish a solid mid-table. I don't think they're going to do a Wolves, like Johnny said, for the same reasons. They've got a decent squad. They've got a solid Premier League squad, and I think they'll stay up comfortably. They won't be fighting relegation, I don't think, and they'll probably finish like 10th, 11th, 12th, something like that. If they're lucky, they'll break into the top half, but they'll have a solid season. They'll stay up, and then next summer, I think they'll go and spend again, and they'll try and build something over the next couple of years. On Tammy Abraham, I don't think they were ever going to. I think Chelsea told them that he was staying at Chelsea this season.
Probably with the transfer ban, I think that's why.
Exactly.
With the transfer ban, yeah, I mean he's in contention to become one of the first choice strikers this summer at Chelsea. So I don't think that, and he wants to go back to Chelsea anyway. He said publicly he wanted to try and make it at Chelsea. So I don't think that was ever going to happen. So Villa have done well. They've got someone in to replace him in the team.
Sorry to stick on Aston Villa for so long, but do you not see a bit of a comparison with what Fulham did last summer, where they spent a lot of money? They spent over 120 million, I think it was, in the end, and it did not help them.
What I would say with Fulham, though, is that they got a lot of new loan players in, like Callum Chambers and Sergio Rico, and they signed 2 goalkeepers, and it was weird because they seemed to do goalkeeper rotation with 3 keepers, Marcus Bettinelli, Sergio Rico, and Fabri, I think, as well. They rotated the 3 of them throughout the season, so that showed there was an inconsistency in goalkeeper because they all seemed to have good points and bad points, all 3 goalkeepers, so none of them was the obvious number one. That was one issue, a lack of consistency, but that was across the whole lineup. They had too many players almost, and they signed virtually a whole new starting 11 when the season started. A lot of these players who were coming in on loan, I think Mitrovic is an exception because he was on loan and they signed him permanently. He actually didn't do too bad. But many of the other loan players that they brought in and signings hadn't been with the club initially. So they were starting the season with almost 10, 11 players to integrate into the first team. And there was just a lack of cohesion completely. And people like Jean-Michel Seri from
Nice.
He was from Nice, yeah. And he was excellent for Nice, I thought. And he was actually linked with some of the big clubs in England.
It looked like an absolute coup for Fulham.
Problem was, it was like, he started quite well the season, but as soon as things weren't going quite well, it's similar to QPR when they signed quite a few big name players. Their attitude wasn't there, the fight wasn't there, the hunger wasn't there. It was almost like, I'm better than this. I should be playing for a club that's going to be staying relatively well in the Premier League, not struggling right at the bottom. And I think Fulham just got too many players. They went a bit money crazy and almost getting players for the sake of getting players without any cohesion, without any idea of how it was all going to gel together. With Villa, I feel like there's a plan. Even though the money is being spent, there's much more of a plan. Some of the players have already been at Villa, which helps. And the players that are being brought in, generally, we feel, I think me and James, and probably you, Dec, would agree, are players who have a good attitude, who don't carry that ego. And there seems to be, like I say, there seems to just be more of a plan in place.
Yeah, definitely.
I agree 100% with all of that. There's a clear strategy and a plan, and they're getting people with the right attitude, with the right character. They're getting leaders. You look at the players they're targeting, a lot of them are leaders. I think as well, like John Terry being in the coaching staff at Villa makes a difference because he's got the right character, the right mentality. Players have said that he brings that out in them as well. I remember like Tammy Abraham and Tyrone Mings both said that. Yeah, I think there's a much more stability at Villa.
Dean Smith's a manager, of course, used to manage Brentford. Likes to play football in the right way, doesn't he? And I feel like they might entertain, not maybe overplay, but entertain in a way that it would be very. Well, it's very different, wasn't it, to the Steve Bruce days of the season before, where it was a lot more direct ball, and they almost got up playing that way, but it was a very different style to what they used to now.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be a good season for Aston Villa, irrelevant of where they finish. I think that for Aston Villa fans, they'll just be excited to be back in the Premier League. Especially for someone like myself, I've grown up with Aston Villa always being a Premier League team, and it was weird when they got relegated because they'd always been a mainstay in the Premier League since its inclusion in 1992. So I feel like it's exciting to see them back and exciting to see them have this sort of fun squad, and I imagine it is quite exciting to be an Aston Villa fan again. I guess we've got a very good derby to look forward to there with Aston Villa Wolverhampton in the season. But I just want to go with one final topic before we wrap up and stick with the sort of claret and blue trend. Look at a quite reported transfer this week is West Ham United and trying to find a replacement for Marco Arnautovic, who's now gone to China. Obviously, they were originally linked with Maxi Gomez for the past 3 or 4 weeks, and that seems to have fallen through now, even though apparently they're still interested. But now their attention has turned to Germany and in the Frenchman Sebastian Haller from Eintracht Frankfurt. Obviously, Chelsea fans will be quite familiar with him after his good performances against Chelsea in the Europa League. He scored 20 goals in all competitions last season. What do you guys think of this? Do you think he could make it in the Premier League?
I think he's a quality player. Jovic got all the headlines last year for good reason, because he's a top-class player. I think he's going to be a world-class striker in a not long distant time. All Chelsea fans all wanted to sign him. But we also, I think a lot of Chelsea fans liked Haller as well when we saw him. He's a quality striker, and he's young. He's going to improve, and Pellegrini is an attacking manager. He's got some good attacking players there as well at West Ham who can supply him with chances. I think that would be a really, really good signing for West Ham.
Do you agree with the sort of £40 million price that's being suggested?
Yeah.
I think West Ham are looking, though, aren't they, for that statement signing? They always seem to do that. And obviously Pellegrini is a manager who has previous with working with top-level players, and he almost carries that sort of ability to attract their names such as this, for them, because people want to work under someone who's formerly managed Manchester City, Real Madrid and such. And I think he's a very understated manager, Pellegrini, actually. He goes about his business quietly, but you get the sense he wants to build something quite special with West Ham in a similar way to what he did with Malaga. So it will be interesting to see if they can pull this one off. I'm sure they would like to. They want someone who's got the attitude, which Arnautovic clearly didn't towards the end, as the tweet suggested. Before we do, I've just got one more thing we should probably mention, is the Koscielny thing.
Okay.
That ties in quite well, segue, with bad attitudes. And obviously, someone asked me on Twitter today, actually, someone who actually listens to this show, one of the followers.
Of fabled listeners.
Yeah, one of the 2 listeners that listens told us that, is Koscielny still a club legend after what's gone on?
Oh, I think it's really difficult because he's been a really, really great servant for Arsenal, and even through all the dark times, I feel like it's always been to be an Arsenal fan in recent memory. He's always sort of been there and been reliable, especially when they've had centre-backs recently that haven't been so reliable, as I'm sure some Arsenal fans would be happy to tell you. But it's just a real shame that obviously they've been discussing something for a while with the club and that he wanted to leave this summer. And it's a real shame that it's going to end this way, and it's going to end quite ugly, because it does really tarnish that legacy that he sort of had at Arsenal, and he has been a great servant, but unfortunately I feel like the damage is already done.
Well, they said actually the 2 things that David Ornstein said about this Koscielny situation was that he wasn't happy with how his minutes were managed after returning from Achilles injury in December. He wasn't happy with how his playing schedule was managed, and he wasn't happy with the overall direction of the club and the team. You could probably understand that a little bit, judging by the lack of a budget that's been given to Emery, maybe. But then again, I think he was particularly keen on the way Emery's managed him personally. So there's a bit of there's friction with the manager a little bit, but also friction with the hierarchy of the club.
Exactly. But I feel like Arsenal fans can be quite unforgiving, and even though they can appreciate what he's done, it's not a good example to set when you're club captain, and that's why it feels like there's no coming back from it.
Yeah, I think there's no coming back from something like that. Yeah, fans are generally quite unforgiving. I still think he probably could have handled it better. I don't think he's that kind of player, if that makes sense. He's not. But I think he's just felt like I've backed into a corner. I've got no choice. This is the only thing I can do to declare my intentions.
Exactly.
And I kind of sympathise in that he wants to move and go back to France and play more regularly, and that he could, and certainly being frustrated with Arsenal's ambition.
Yes.
Arsenal fans generally will be frustrated with that. And I think actually a lot of Arsenal fans would be more frustrated about the lack of ambition from the club than this. This is just another kind of... The reason there's probably such hatred about this is because fans are frustrated at the lack of ambition by the club. I mean, I saw an article yesterday, somebody shared with me, of how Kroenke is not willing to release money, not willing to spend money at Arsenal. He's not willing to sanction that. He's not willing to put any of his own money in to back the club. And that is why they've got such a small transfer budget. And I just thought, like, Obviously, I support a rival team, but as much as in terms of from an objective point of view, you have to feel sorry for Arsenal fans because Arsenal is a great club. It's a big club with big history, and there should be much.
Fully, and we discussed money and Arsenal quite a bit last week, and it was quite interesting to get both of your points of views across as well as my own. But I'll try and finish with one sort of quick question so we can sort of go back to the transfer news. Where do you think Laurent Koscielny plays next season?
In France.
Give me a team, Johnny. Come on.
I don't know. I mean,
don't play hard to get.
I think he was linked with Bordeaux, actually, wasn't he, recently?
Okay.
And that's the kind of club I think. I don't think it's definitely not PSG because this Laurent Koscielny is a little bit over the hill. One of the reasons why I think there is such an uproar is because, as bizarre as it sounds, even the fact that he's past his prime, he's still probably Arsenal's or one of Arsenal's most reliable centre-backs. And that's why there's an annoyance there almost. And the club show no signs. Even with the youngster Saliba from Saint Etienne, even if they pull that one off, that deal off, they then risk losing him on loan for a season. So it's just madness. Yeah. It's just so frustrating if you're an Arsenal fan at the moment. But I would say a higher end French club.
You're saying Bordeaux. That's what you're saying, Johnny. Where do you think, James? Where's your pick out of the 20 teams?
I read an article saying that the 3 clubs in France that wanted him were Bordeaux, Lyon, and Rennes. And so any of those 3 probably. I mean, it's from the Telegraph, so it's pretty reliable source. So I would say a club of that kind of level in France. He won't get. I don't. PSG, no, not at all. Definitely not. Especially with his injury record. So yeah, one of those kind of clubs in France, and yeah, that they'll find a way to make that happen because they won't want a disruptive influence in the camp,
I fully agree with both of you. I feel like that Bordeaux does sort of make sense there, and I feel like that's what Koscielny wants at the end of the day. And hopefully it's dealt with as quick as possible, so it's not as ugly as it already seems. But I feel like that's enough for us to wrap up for today. So it was good. It was good talking to you guys. I hope you guys at home have enjoyed listening to it wherever you are. And it's a goodbye from us, and we'll speak about all the transfer news that happens in the coming week, and we'll see you next week.
Shalom.
Goodbye.
See you next week.